Today's a pretty important day. In fact, the whole month of February is extremely busy. We have Valentine's Day tomorrow. We are in the middle of a Winter Olympics in Beijing that's been going on for over a week now. We have President's Day coming up shortly. The entire month is Black History Month. And of course, today is Super Bowl Sunday. So like I said, I'm really impressed that you are here, even though you can still be here and go back and see the game. So I give you a lot of credit for your presence. I was told by Reverend Harada that Super Bowl Sunday is the #1 most important religious holiday in the United States. And I sort of agree with him. I went through and got some statistics about the Super Bowl, and I would like to share some of those with you. So first of all, it's going to be held in SoFi Stadium, which cost $5.5 billion, and it seats 70,000 people. Tickets, which I checked on StubHub yesterday, on the low end are $2,740, all the way up to $12,000 for seats. When my son told me a couple weeks ago that they would be $2,000 a seat, I couldn't believe it, but it's true. There, on NBC has the rights to the Super Bowl this year, so they have been selling 30-second commercial spots for $7 million. And they expect 3.4 million adults will be betting close to $7.6 billion on this game. You know, that's just an estimate. And they expect maybe 117 million viewers. It's a lot of people. It is, I guess, the most important religious holiday of America. And of course, later I will be watching the game. I have cilantro lime wings marinating in my refrigerator, which I will make when I get home for my family, and we will enjoy the game. So with all of these things going on today, I instead decided to focus on something called Remembering Thay this Nirvana Day. And it seems like a fairly innocuous sort of topic, given all that's happening today with Super Bowl and but I'm hoping that it might balance out what the Super Bowl represents. February 15th is Nirvana Day, when Buddhists remember the passing of Shakyamuni Buddha 2,500 years ago. And then on January 22nd, just 3 weeks ago, the world mourned the passing of Thich Nhat Hanh in his home temple in Vietnam, where he died at the age of 95. He's known affectionately as Thay by his followers, and he's undoubtedly one of the most well-known Buddhists in the modern era. And his impact on bringing Buddhism to the world consciousness has been profound. So I would like to honor both of these individuals today and commemorate the fact that their lives have maybe a much more lasting effect than the Super Bowl on all of us, and perhaps be kind of a counterpoint to what's happening with the Super Bowl. I'm not criticizing anybody who enjoys the Super Bowl. You know, we all have to have the things that we like doing. I enjoy sports. But I think it's important to recognize that in many ways all of these activities are distractions to maybe the real purpose of why we are here on this planet and what our purpose in life is going forward. So hopefully we'll get a few maybe ideas about that today. What my talk sort of reminds me of, it brings to mind the motto for Dartmouth College, where my husband and son both went. And in Latin, it is vox clamatus in deserto, which translated means a voice crying in the wilderness. And so in some ways I kind of feel like this is my message. It's a voice crying in the wilderness with the cacophony of Super Bowl. This very simple little message is being brought forth today, but hopefully it will be heard by some and maybe make a difference. So let's begin with Shakyamuni Buddha. And today, or Nirvana Day, is the day that we commemorate his passing. He had a last message that he gave to his followers. And I would like to give you two quotations of kind of the essence of what he said on that last day. One comes from Dr. Nobuo Haneda, who in his December 2021 newsletter, Dharma Breeze, which I receive regularly along with, I know, other members of our Sangha, he talked about something called an outline of Shinran's teaching, and he said, rely on the Dharma, rely on the self. And that's going to be kind of the theme that I'll follow today, related to Shakyamuni's passing. So the way that Dr. Haneda relates it in his newsletter, he says that on Shakyamuni's deathbed, his disciple Ananda was weeping and said, according to Dr. Haneda, "What will happen to me if my teacher passes away today? I will be totally lost. I will have no refuge in my life." And Dr. Haneda said that Shakyamuni Buddha said, "Ananda, you should rely on the Dharma, not on any human being. You should rely on the self, not on other things. Make an effort to seek the Dharma." So I'm going to share also another quote, basically the same idea that comes from the one that we have in our service book, which we say is just another rendition of Shakyamuni's last words. And in the service book it says, "Therefore, be a lamp unto yourself, be a refuge to yourself. Take yourself to no external refuge. Hold fast to the truth as a lamp. Hold fast to the truth as a refuge. Look not for a refuge in anyone besides yourself." So what do you think he was meaning by this statement? Well, Dr. Haneda has interpreted it this way. He says that the Buddha was asking us to do two things. Discover the Dharma, ultimate truth that embodies the truths of impermanence and conditional arising. Everything's connected. I think a couple of weeks ago, or a few weeks ago, I talked about the two eyes of Shakyamuni's awakening, this idea of impermanence and interdependence. So he's telling you to be one with this ultimate truth. And the second thing that Shakyamuni is telling us is to find your true self beyond the ego self, the self that is one with reality and finds meaning in all things, and becoming a person that we, in our tradition, call a person of Shinjin. So, holding on to this thought, let's now turn to Thich Nhat Hanh, who is somebody I feel embodied the message of the Buddha. So here we have Thich Nhat Hanh, born in 1926 and passed away just this year. So he was born in Vietnam, and I included this map because, interestingly, most people think about Southeast Asia, the countries of Laos, Thailand, Cambodia, Sri Lanka, as kind of a form of Buddhism called Theravada. We call that original or early Buddhism. But interestingly, Vietnam has a unique situation that they are very close to China. So a very strong Chan or Zen influence came into Vietnam. And so in Vietnam, while you do have Theravadan schools of Buddhism, you also have this Mahayana form of Buddhism, of Zen, and that was Thich Nhat Hanh's tradition. So he was ordained at the age of 16, as I mentioned, in a Zen tradition. And at the age of 35, he went to the United States to study. He eventually did teach some classes at Princeton and at Columbia universities. And before that, though, he was in Vietnam during the big changeover from the colonial powers. As some of you may know from history, Southeast Asia had been colonized by European countries. Vietnam had been very French. And during the 50s and after World War II, a lot of those countries were being released from their colonization, and then these power struggles, political power struggles, started happening. And so Thich Nhat Hanh was sort of living during this very tumultuous time. And so, again, as I mentioned, in 1961, he went to the West, and he studied there. He mastered English. And he returned home in 1964, and at that point, he kind of dove into an anti-war activism, and because the war in Vietnam was escalating. So he was caught kind of in the middle of all of the turmoil that was happening at this time. In Vietnam, he founded the Order of Interbeing, which promoted engaged Buddhism, dedicated to nonviolence, mindfulness, social service. So both these ideas of engaged Buddhism and mindfulness were something very important that Thich Nhat Hanh brought to the world. And I will elaborate a little bit more about that. So according to Thich Nhat Hanh, Buddhism means to be awake, mindful of what is happening. If you are awake, you cannot do otherwise than act compassionately to help relieve suffering you see around you. So Buddhism must be engaged in the world. If it is not engaged, it is not Buddhism. And so during the Vietnam War, he was very active in trying to find a way for peace in his country. And he continued that effort throughout his whole life. Here is a picture that comes from Ken Tanaka's recent book, Jewels, where on the cover he has a picture of a peace march, and in the very center front is Thich Nhat Hanh. So he was very active throughout his whole life in what is called engaged Buddhism. So back in 1966, he met Martin Luther King. He was in the United States. At that point, he was exiled from Vietnam because of his activism. Both North and South Vietnam, who were fighting in conflict at that time, wouldn't allow him to come back to his country. So this encounter with Dr. King was a very remarkable one for both men. Thich Nhat Hanh greatly admired Dr. King and all of his efforts to promote social justice in America, and of course we all know how important his work here has been. And he told Dr. King that he thought he was a bodhisattva, an enlightened being. Dr. King, on his part, was also impressed with Thay's efforts to promote reconciliation between the US-backed South and the communist North. And in 1967, he nominated Thich Nhat Hanh to receive the Nobel Peace Prize. Unfortunately, that year, the Peace Prize wasn't given. I don't know why. I didn't do any research into that. But, and then, of course, the following year, in 1968, Martin Luther King was assassinated. So at this meeting in 1966, they were fairly close contemporaries. Thich Nhat Hanh at this point was 40 years old, and Dr. Martin Luther King was 37. So you can see that they were both quite young men. Thich Nhat Hanh's efforts in 1966 to campaign against the war, as I mentioned, angered both the North and the South, and so he was exiled and not allowed to return to Vietnam, which he did not do until 2005, so many, many years later. So in exile, he founded a retreat center in southern France called Plum Village, where he pretty much lived for most of the rest of his life, not until the very end. Over the years, he established 10 more retreat centers all over the world, including Deer Park in Escondido, California. I don't know if anyone has ever been to Deer Park, but if anyone of you know Judy Nakatomi at the Vista Buddhist Temple, she was very active with Deer Park. She's one of our minister's assistants. She's certified with the BCA as a minister's assistant. But she is also an ordained minister. I don't know really what the official title is, but she is also in the Thich Nhat Hanh lineage as well. So being down in Vista, she's very close to Escondido, so it was very easy for her to go back and forth. But I think many of the Vista Sangha have had encounters in Deer Park. So people can go, they have retreats. They do have many, I guess a whole Sangha of monks and nuns who live there at all times, but they also allow visitors, and so that's something that you might consider doing. Anyway, Thich Nhat Hanh would come and visit. He would visit all of his retreat centers and hold talks and retreats while he was visiting, but he pretty much was established in France. Okay. So going back to his idea of mindfulness, he says that to weather the storms of life and realize happiness, always return to the breath, even while doing routine chores like sweeping and washing dishes. I try to live every moment like that, relaxed, dwelling peacefully in the present moment, and respond to events with compassion. And that's something that was very evident if you ever have read any of his readings. Over nearly 8 decades, Thich Nhat Hanh's teachings have refined his concepts into things that were accessible to everyone. He's a well-read author of over 100 books, and through his books, talks, and retreats, he introduced Zen Buddhism at its essence as peace through compassionate listening. If any of you saw the recent Wheel of Dharma, on the very top cover, Reverend Hamada has an article called In Memory of the Venerable Buddhist Master Thich Nhat Hanh. And over the years, if any of you have come to our adult study sessions, you know that Reverend Hamada relied on many Thich Nhat Hanh readings for study classes. He was an important teacher for Reverend Hamada, as he has been for, I think, many of us here at OCBC. His books are very accessible, very relatable, and he has done a tremendous amount to bring these ideas of engaged Buddhism and mindfulness to the world. In 2014, Thich Nhat Hanh had a stroke that left him unable to speak. And so, he was advancing in age, and his death was not unexpected. After all, he was 95 when he passed away. But his passing was still very painful for his followers. In speaking about the meaning of death, both his and others, Thay always emphasized that it was a transition from one manifestation to another, and that nothing is ever really lost, only changed. That's very Buddhist. In his book, No Death, No Fear, he spoke about his mother's passing and said, I understood then that the idea of having lost my mother was just an idea. Walking slowly in the moonlight through the rows of tea plants, I noticed my mother was still with me. She was the moonlight caressing me, as she had done so often, very tender, very sweet, wonderful. Each time my feet touched the earth, I knew my mother was there with me. So as to his own passing, a memorial service was held in honor of Thich Nhat Hanh at Deer Park, which highlighted the theme, "A cloud never dies." And, quote, "That's the theme of the 7-day service we are holding for our teacher," said Brother Phap Dung, a Dharma teacher at the monastery. "It means our teacher doesn't die. He just manifests differently now. The cloud becomes rain, becomes grass, becomes tea. He's not dead now. He's just in a different form." So now coming back full circle to Shakyamuni Buddha's final words, may I suggest that Thich Nhat Hanh was someone who fulfilled Shakyamuni Buddha's imperative to discover the Dharma, ultimate truth, of seeing life as it truly is, and to find his true self, beyond the ego self, becoming a person of what we would call Shinjin. So he or I or all of us who attempt to convey the Buddhist teachings, we may be voices crying in the wilderness, but I think we are also being heard. And I appreciate the fact that you are here this morning to hear. Please join me in Gassho. Namo Amida Butsu. Namo Amida Butsu. Naman Dabutsu. Naman Dabutsu. Naman Dabutsu.